My name is Emily, and at 34 years old, I never expected family betrayal to cut so deep. When my brother Josh invited me to his housewarming party last month, I had no idea it was a setup. We had our differences growing up, but losing Grandpa 3 months ago left a hole in my heart that was still raw. That evening, Josh gathered everyone around to announce that Grandpa had left him the beloved lake house where we spent our summers. If you are watching this right now, please hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from as I share how everything changed when I returned to Josh's house 1 hour later. Growing up in Boston, my relationship with Grandpa Frank was something special. From the time I was a little girl with scraped knees and pigtails, he was my biggest supporter. When other adults in my life seemed too busy or distracted, Grandpa always made time for me. He lived just 20 minutes from our family home, and I would often ride my bike to his house after school, especially when things got tense at home. Josh came along when I was 2 years old. Even though we were close in age, our personalities couldn't have been more different. I was the responsible one, always doing my homework without being asked, helping with chores, and trying to please our parents. Josh was charming and carefree, the kind of kid who could talk his way out of trouble with a smile. He knew exactly how to wrap our parents around his finger. Our parents, Tom and Linda, tried to hide their favoritism, but it was obvious to me from an early age. When Josh brought home AC on his report card, they would praise him for passing. When I brought home all A's with 1 B, they would ask why I couldn't get all A's. When Josh forgot to do his chores, they would laugh it off as boys being boys. If I missed a single task on my chore list, I would lose privileges for a week. Josh just needs more encouragement, Mom would say whenever I pointed out the double standard. You're naturally responsible, Emily. You don't need the same kind of support. But Grandpa saw me. He recognized my efforts and celebrated my achievements. When I won the spelling bee in 4th grade, my parents skipped the ceremony for Josh's soccer game. Grandpa was there in the front row, beaming with pride. He took me for ice cream afterward and told me how proud he was. You have a sharp mind and a good heart, Emily, he said. Those 2 things will take you further in life than anything else. The lake house became my sanctuary during summers. It was a 3-bedroom cabin on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, nothing fancy but filled with character. The wooden dock stretched out into the clear water, and I would spend hours there reading books while dangling my feet in the cool lake. Josh was always more interested in showing off for the neighbor kids, racing jet skis or trying to impress the girls from nearby cabins. Grandpa would take me fishing at dawn, teaching me patience and the value of quiet observation. We would cook our catch for breakfast, and he would tell me stories about his youth, about meeting Grandma, about the lessons life had taught him. Josh rarely joined these early morning expeditions, preferring to sleep in and then complain there was nothing to do. During high school, I worked part-time at the local pharmacy while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I was determined to become a nurse, inspired by the hospice nurses who had cared for my grandmother in her final days. Josh barely maintained the grades to graduate and spent most of his time with a revolving door of girlfriends and fair-weather friends. You need to lighten up, Em. He would tell me when I declined invitations to parties where I knew there would be drinking. All work and no play is making you boring. But Grandpa understood my focus. Some people plant seeds for the future, he told me. Others just want to pick flowers that someone else planted. Keep planting your seeds, Emily. I followed my plan, graduating with honors and getting accepted to nursing school. My parents attended my graduation, of course. But they seemed more excited a month later when Josh landed a commission-based sales job without even finishing his first year of community college. He has such natural people skills, Dad boasted. He will probably be making more money than you despite all your education, Emily. I tried not to let it bother me, focusing instead on building my career and my life. I became a cardiac care nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, found a small but comfortable apartment in Cambridge, and built a circle of close friends. Josh bounced between sales jobs, always starting with enthusiasm before losing interest when the work got challenging. He borrowed money from our parents regularly, money that was never repaid, but always forgiven. Our relationship grew more distant in adulthood. We would see each other at family gatherings, exchange obligatory birthday texts, and occasionally grab coffee if we happened to be in the same area. But the easy camaraderie of early childhood never returned. There was always an undercurrent of competition, fueled by our parents' continued favoritism and Josh's resentment of my close relationship with Grandpa. When Grandpa was diagnosed with congestive heart failure 2 years ago, I rearranged my work schedule to help with his care. 3 days a week, I would drive to his house after my shift, prepare meals for him, organize his medications, take him to doctor appointments, and simply sit with him, listening to his stories and holding his hand as he grew weaker. Josh visited occasionally, usually for short, upbeat visits where he would tell Grandpa about his latest venture or girlfriend, carefully avoiding any mention of the reality of Grandpa's declining health. He never offered to take Grandpa to appointments or stay overnight when Grandpa had particularly bad episodes. Josh has a lot going on right now, Mom would defend him. He shows his love in different ways. During Grandpa's final weeks, I took a leave of absence from work to be with him full-time. Josh made 2 brief appearances, both times seeming uncomfortable and eager to leave. When Grandpa passed away in his sleep with me holding his hand, Josh was at a sales conference in Vegas. The funeral was a blur of grief for me. Josh gave a polished eulogy full of generic platitudes about Grandpa's love of fishing and family, stories that sounded rehearsed rather than personal. I was too overwhelmed with grief to speak, something my mother later criticized. "It would have been nice if you had said something," she commented. Josh really stepped up. The weeks after Grandpa's death were a fog of grief for me. I returned to work, going through the motions while trying to process the enormous loss. Josh, meanwhile, seemed to bounce back quickly. 3 months after Grandpa's death, he announced he had purchased a new home in Brookline, one of Boston's most expensive neighborhoods. I wondered how he could afford such a place on his sales salary but didn't ask. Assuming our parents had helped him with the down payment, as they had done with his previous purchases. When the text invitation to his housewarming party arrived, I was surprised to be included. We had barely spoken since the funeral, and what little communication we had was strained. But something in me hoped that perhaps grief had matured him, that maybe we could rebuild some kind of relationship as adults who had both lost someone precious to us. I couldn't have been more wrong. The text message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was on my lunch break at the hospital. "Hey sis, having a housewarming party this Saturday at 7. New address is 32 Beacon Street, Brookline. Bring a dish to share. No gifts necessary, but alcohol welcome." I stared at my phone for several minutes, unsure how to respond. Josh and I had barely spoken since Grandpa's funeral 3 months ago. Our last interaction had been a tense exchange at our parents' house for Sunday dinner, where he had monopolized the conversation with stories about his latest sales achievements while completely ignoring my recent promotion at work. "Are you going to Josh's party?" my mom texted shortly after. "It would mean a lot to him if you came." I doubted that was true, but I had been working with my therapist, Dr. Winters, on setting boundaries while still maintaining family connections when possible. "Do you think attending would be good for you?" Dr. Winters asked during our Thursday session when I brought up the invitation. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to support any attempt at family connection. Another part of me is afraid it will just be more of the same dynamic, with Josh being the golden child and me feeling invisible." "What would your grandfather advise you to do?" she asked gently. The question brought tears to my eyes. Grandpa had always encouraged me to take the high road, but also to protect my heart. He would probably tell me to go but not to expect too much, I said finally. He always believed in giving people chances, but not at the expense of my own well-being. "That sounds like wise advice," Dr. Winters smiled. "Perhaps you could set a time limit for yourself. Commit to staying for an hour and then reassess how you feel." I decided to go, sending Josh a brief text confirming my attendance. His response was equally brief, a thumbs-up emoji. On Saturday morning, I went shopping for a housewarming gift, despite Josh's "no gifts necessary" disclaimer. I selected a set of quality kitchen knives, knowing Josh was surprisingly into cooking, one of the few interests we actually shared. I spent extra time wrapping it neatly, adding a card with a simple message: "Congratulations on your new home. Wishing you many happy memories here. Love, Emily." While getting ready for the party, I called my best friend Stephanie, who had seen me through the worst days after Grandpa's death. "I'm not sure why I'm even going," I confessed as I applied mascara, trying to cover the lingering shadows under my eyes from months of grief and poor sleep. "Josh and I haven't had a real conversation in years. Maybe he's extending an olive branch," Stephanie suggested. "People sometimes reassess relationships after losing someone important." "Maybe," I said, though I doubted it. "I keep thinking about what Grandpa said to me the last time we really talked. He made me promise to try to maintain a relationship with Josh, even though he knew it was difficult." "Your grandfather was a wise man," Stephanie said. "But remember, relationships are two-way streets. You can only do your part." I chose my outfit carefully. A casual but flattering navy blue dress with a light cardigan and comfortable but stylish flats. I wanted to look put together, but not like I was trying too hard. I even took extra time with my hair, blow-drying my normally unruly curls into smooth waves. "You're going to a party, not a job interview," I told my reflection, but I knew the extra effort was armor of sorts. Looking my best always gave me confidence when facing challenging social situations. The drive to Brookline took 20 minutes in Saturday evening traffic. Josh's new neighborhood was undeniably upscale, with tree-lined streets and historic homes that I knew sold for millions. I felt a familiar pang of curiosity about how Josh could afford such a place, mixed with the equally familiar feeling that asking would only lead to an uncomfortable conversation. I found parking a block away and walked to the address. A beautiful Victorian with a meticulously maintained garden. Through the large bay windows, I could already see a crowd inside. I took a deep breath, clutched my gift, and rang the doorbell. The door swung open to reveal Josh, dressed in designer jeans and a crisp button-down shirt that probably cost more than my entire outfit. "Emily," he said, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You made it." "Congratulations on the new place," I said, handing him the gift. "It's beautiful from the outside." "Wait till you see the inside," he replied, stepping back to let me enter. I completely renovated the kitchen and master bath. The house was indeed stunning, with hardwood floors, high ceilings, and an open-concept first floor that looked straight out of a design magazine. At least 30 people were already there, clustered in conversation groups, drinks in hand. I recognized our parents, a few aunts and uncles, and several cousins, mixed with faces I assumed were Josh's friends and colleagues. "Wow," I said, genuinely impressed. "This is really something." "Josh." "I know," he grinned, with the familiar hint of smugness I remembered from childhood. "Drink table is in the dining room. Food in the kitchen. Mingle. I need to greet some other guests." And with that, he was gone, leaving me standing alone in the entryway. I made my way to the dining room, poured myself a glass of white wine, and steeled myself to socialize. Our parents spotted me and waved me over. "Emily, there you are," Mom said, kissing my cheek. "Isn't this place magnificent? Josh has done so well for himself." "It's very nice," I agreed. "How are you both doing?" "Oh, we're fine," Dad said dismissively. "Still adjusting to life without your grandfather, of course, but time marches on." "Have you seen the backyard yet?" Mom asked, already moving on from the mention of Grandpa. "Josh has put in the most gorgeous stone patio. He says he plans to add a hot tub next spring." I nodded and sipped my wine, letting their enthusiasm wash over me. After a few minutes of listening to them marvel over every detail of Josh's new home, I excused myself to look around. The kitchen was indeed impressive, with marble countertops and high-end appliances. I overheard two women discussing Josh as I pretended to examine the fancy refrigerator. I had no idea sales managers made this kind of money. One woman said, "I heard he came into some family money recently," the other replied in a hushed tone. "His grandfather passed away a few months ago." I moved away quickly, not wanting to hear more. The comment about family money struck me as odd. As far as I knew, Grandpa hadn't been wealthy. He had lived comfortably but modestly on his pension and investments. We hadn't discussed the will or inheritance since his passing, which I had assumed meant there wasn't much to distribute. For the next 30 minutes, I made awkward small talk with relatives I rarely saw and friends of Josh's who clearly had no idea who I was. I was considering making an early exit when Josh clinked a glass loudly, calling for everyone's attention. "First, I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate my new home with me," he announced, standing on the bottom step of the staircase for extra height. "As many of you know, I've worked really hard to get where I am today." There were cheers and raised glasses from his friends. I took another sip of wine, noting how different his social circle was from mine. Where my friends were mostly fellow healthcare workers and a few college roommates I'd stayed close with, Josh surrounded himself with polished, expensively dressed people who looked like they belonged in a luxury lifestyle magazine. "What some of you may not know," Josh continued, "is that I recently lost my grandfather, who was very special to me." I nearly choked on my wine. Josh had visited Grandpa perhaps 5 times during his entire 2-year illness. Before he passed, Josh went on, his voice taking on a rehearsed emotional quality, "He made a decision that I'm humbled and honored by. My grandfather left me his vacation property on Lake Winnipesaukee." The room erupted in congratulatory murmurs. I stood frozen, my glass halfway to my lips, certain I had misheard. "He gave me this letter before he died," Josh said, pulling an envelope from his pocket and holding it up. In it, he explained that he wanted me to have the lake house because he knew how much it meant to me, and how I would preserve his legacy there. He unfolded a piece of paper and read selectively, "To my grandson Josh, I leave my lake property, knowing you will care for it as I have, and create new memories there for the next generation." I couldn't breathe. The lake house had been Grandpa's pride and joy, the place where he had taught me to fish, where we had shared countless sunrise conversations on the dock, where he had told me stories of Grandma that made her feel alive even though she had passed before I was born. I had assumed, perhaps naively, that Grandpa would leave it to both of us, or that it would be sold and any proceeds split among family members. Josh finished reading and looked directly at me, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "So, as you can see, this new house isn't the only property I'm celebrating tonight." The room's attention followed his gaze, and suddenly I felt dozens of eyes on me, some curious, some pitying. I forced my face into a neutral expression, years of nursing experience helping me maintain composure despite the shock coursing through me. "That's great," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady. "Good for you, Josh." I set my wine glass down on a nearby table, picked up my purse, and walked calmly to the door. No one tried to stop me. No one called after me. I made it to my car before the first tear fell. The drive home passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I had to remind myself to breathe normally. Traffic lights changed from red to green without registering in my mind, and I navigated by muscle memory rather than conscious thought. How could Grandpa have left the lake house solely to Josh? The place that had been my sanctuary, where I had spent countless hours by his side, where I had helped him maintain the property as his health declined. It made no sense. More troubling was Josh's smug expression when he looked at me during his announcement. There had been something almost victorious in his eyes, as if this inheritance was not just a gift, but a weapon aimed directly at me. By the time I pulled into my apartment building's parking lot, my shock had begun to crystallize into something sharper. Fragments of memories clicked together like puzzle pieces. Grandpa's comments about wanting to be fair with his estate, his repeated assurances that the lake house would be preserved for future generations, his pointed questions about whether Josh and I could work together on anything. Inside my apartment, I dropped my purse on the counter and kicked off my shoes. The silence felt oppressive after the noise of the party. My cat, Milo, wound around my ankles, sensing my distress. But even his comfort couldn't penetrate the numbness spreading through me. I moved to my bedroom closet almost on autopilot, reaching for the box of Grandpa's personal items I had brought home after clearing out his house. Most of his possessions had been donated or distributed according to a list he had prepared, But these few things he had specifically asked me to keep: his favorite fishing hat, the watch Grandma had given him on their 25th anniversary, photo albums, and a few books. I pulled out the thickest photo album, the one documenting summers at the lake house. Perhaps there was some comfort to be found in these memories, even if the physical place was now lost to me. As I flipped through pages of faded photographs, a sealed envelope slipped from between the last pages and fell to the floor. My name was written on the front in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting, slightly shakier than I remembered from my childhood. With trembling fingers, I opened it, unfolding several pages of his familiar stationery. "My dearest Emily," it began. "If you're reading this, then I am gone, and you have discovered this letter where I knew only you would look first for comfort, in our shared memories." Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away, determined to read his words clearly. "By now, you may have heard about my decisions regarding the lake house. I want you to understand my reasoning. The lake property is to be shared equally between you and your brother. You will have joint ownership, with you as the primary trustee due to your proven responsibility." I gasped, reading the sentence again. Joint ownership? Primary trustee? This contradicted everything Josh had announced. "I know this arrangement may create challenges," Grandpa's letter continued. "Josh has always struggled with financial responsibility, which is why I've structured it this way. You will have final say on any major decisions regarding the property, including potential sale, which I hope will never happen. My attorney has all the legal documents prepared." My mind raced. Josh had clearly misrepresented the inheritance, reading only selected portions of whatever letter he had. But why would Grandpa give him a different letter than the will specified? The answer came in the next paragraph. "I've told Josh about this arrangement in person, and also left him a letter explaining my decision. I know he may be disappointed not to have full control, but I believe this structure will help him grow while protecting a place that means so much to both of you. My hope is that the lake house will heal the rift between you, not widen it." I reached for my phone with shaking hands and called Mark Donovan, Grandpa's attorney, not caring that it was nearly 10 at night. To my surprise, he answered. "Emily, I was going to call you on Monday," he said, his voice grave. "I take it you've discovered the situation with the lake house?" "Josh announced at his housewarming party tonight that Grandpa left him the lake house," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I just found a letter from Grandpa saying we're supposed to share ownership, with me as primary trustee." There was a heavy silence on the line. "That's correct," Mark finally said. "Your grandfather's will is very clear on this point. The lake property is to be held in joint tenancy, with you having 51% ownership and final decision-making authority. Does Josh know this?" Another pause. "Yes. We reviewed the will together 3 weeks ago. He asked for copies of all documents, which I provided." My free hand clenched into a fist. "So he deliberately misled everyone." "It appears so," Mark said carefully. "Emily, there's something else you should know. I received notification yesterday that someone has been making inquiries with a real estate agent about listing the property. I was going to contact you both on Monday about it." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Josh is trying to sell the lake house. It seems that way. Without your signature, he can't complete a sale. But he could certainly start the process in bad faith. "Has he been to the property?" I asked, suddenly wondering if Josh had already taken possession. "The caretaker reported that Josh has been staying there weekends for the past month," Mark confirmed. "He's also contracted with a renovation company to begin work next week, though again, without your approval as primary trustee, any contracts he's signed aren't binding on the estate." I thanked Mark for the information and promised to meet with him Monday morning. After hanging up, I sat motionless on my bedroom floor, surrounded by photos of happier times, trying to process Josh's betrayal. Not only had he lied about the inheritance, but he was actively trying to sell the property that meant so much to Grandpa, to me, to our family history. And he had publicly humiliated me in the process, making sure everyone believed Grandpa had chosen him over me. The numbness gave way to something I rarely allowed myself to feel: rage. Pure, righteous anger coursed through me, burning away the hurt and confusion. I stood up, gathered the letter and legal documents Mark had previously sent that I had been too grief-stricken to review carefully, and placed them in my purse. I checked my appearance in the mirror, wiped away the mascara streaks, and straightened my shoulders. The party would still be going strong. I had one more appearance to make tonight. The drive back to Josh's house was marked by a strange calm. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by clarity and purpose. The scattered pieces had come together. Josh's sudden ability to afford an expensive home in Brookline, his eagerness to announce the lake house inheritance publicly, his pointed look at me during the announcement. He had been planning this humiliation, perhaps as retribution for years of perceived favoritism from Grandpa. But he had miscalculated badly. Whatever his letter from Grandpa said, it clearly didn't match the legal reality of the will. And now I had both Grandpa's personal letter to me and confirmation from his attorney about the true arrangement. As I pulled up in front of Josh's house again, I noticed several guests were leaving, but lights and voices still spilled from the open windows. I checked the time. Just over an hour had passed since my quiet exit. Perfect timing for a dramatic return. I collected my thoughts before getting out of the car. This confrontation wasn't just about defending my inheritance rights. It was about standing up for Grandpa's wishes and exposing Josh's deception to the family and friends he had used as witnesses to his false claim. With Grandpa's letter and the legal documents in hand, I walked back up the path to Josh's front door. This time, instead of ringing the bell, I opened the door and walked in. The party had thinned somewhat, but a core group remained, including our parents and several close family friends. Josh stood in the center of the living room, drink in hand, regaling his audience with some story that had them all laughing. He faltered mid-sentence when he saw me in the doorway. "Emily," he said, surprise and annoyance flashing across his face. "I thought you left." "I did," I replied evenly, stepping into the room. "But I came back because there's something everyone here needs to know." The remaining guests turned to look at me, curiosity evident on their faces. Our mother looked embarrassed, while our father appeared irritated by the interruption. "Josh made an announcement earlier about inheriting Grandpa's lake house," I continued, my voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. "What he failed to mention is that Grandpa left the lake house to both of us, with me as the primary trustee." A murmur ran through the room. Josh's face darkened. "That's not true," he said quickly. "I have Grandpa's letter right here." He patted his pocket where he had returned the letter after his announcement. "I have Grandpa's letter too," I replied, holding up the pages I had discovered, along with confirmation from his attorney and copies of the legal documents. "The lake house belongs to both of us, Josh. And you know it." I turned to address the room. What Josh also didn't mention is that he's been trying to sell the lake house without my knowledge or consent, something he legally cannot do. Our father stepped forward, his face flushed. "Emily, this is hardly the time or place for this discussion. You're embarrassing yourself and your brother." "Actually, Dad." "Josh chose the time and place when he decided to make a public announcement based on a lie," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I'm simply providing the truth to the same audience." Josh set his drink down with a thud. "You always have to ruin everything, don't you, Emily? Always have to be Grandpa's favorite, always have to be right." And there it was, the real issue, laid bare in front of everyone. "Is that what this is about?" I asked, genuinely surprised by his outburst. "You think I was Grandpa's favorite?" "I know you were," Josh spat. "Everyone knows it." "Poor Josh, he tries so hard, but he'll never measure up to perfect Emily. That's been the soundtrack of my entire life with Grandpa." I shook my head in disbelief. "Josh, Grandpa loved us both. He just showed it differently with each of us." "That's bullshit and you know it," Josh retorted, his composure cracking further. "He left me a portion of the lake house as a consolation prize. He knew I needed it more than you, but he still couldn't bear to give me full control. Still had to put you in charge. Just like always. Needed it more." I repeated, the pieces clicking together. "Is that why you've been trying to sell it? You need the money?" A flash of panic crossed Josh's face before he could mask it. Our parents looked at each other in confusion. "What's she talking about, Josh?" Mom asked. You're not really planning to sell the lake house, are you? That property has been in the family for generations. Josh ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. It's complicated, Mom. I have some investments that need capital, that's all. Investments or debts? I pressed, remembering Mark's comment about Josh's financial irresponsibility. The remaining guests shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware they were witnessing a family dispute that had veered into deeply personal territory. A few murmured excuses and began gathering their things to leave. Josh's girlfriend, Ashley, who had been standing quietly nearby, stepped closer to him. Josh, what's going on? You told me your grandfather left you the lake house free and clear, and that we would spend summers there. Josh shot her an angry look. Not now, Ash. Yes, now, she insisted. Did you lie to me about this? And what investments is she talking about? Josh's facade finally crumbled completely. Fine. You want the truth? I'm in trouble, okay? I borrowed money from some people, made some bad bets. I thought I could turn it around with a few good sales quarters, but it didn't happen fast enough. Borrowed money from what people? Our father demanded. It doesn't matter, Josh said dismissively. What matters is I found a solution. The lake house is worth $1.2 million in today's market. Even split with Emily. That's enough to clear my debts and have plenty left over. I felt a chill run through me. So this whole charade, the announcement, the selective reading of Grandpa's letter. It was all to set up selling the lake house without anyone questioning it. It would have worked, too, Josh said bitterly. If you hadn't been so determined to ruin my life, as usual. I'm not the one trying to sell off our family's legacy to cover gambling debts, I replied, the pieces finally forming a complete picture. That's what this is about, isn't it? Gambling. Josh's silence was confirmation enough. Ashley stepped away from him, shock and disappointment clear on her face. You told me you stopped gambling last year, she said quietly. You promised me, Josh. I tried, he said, not looking at her. But then there was a sure thing, and I needed to make up for previous losses, and it got away from me. Our parents looked devastated. The remaining guests had all but disappeared, leaving just family and a few close friends to witness Josh's unraveling. How much do you owe? Dad asked. Josh named a figure that made Mom gasp. And you thought selling the lake house was the answer? I asked, still trying to process the depth of his deception. The place where we spent every summer growing up? The place Grandpa loved more than anywhere else in the world. What choice did I have? Josh shouted, his composure completely gone now. Not all of us have perfect lives like you, Emily. Some of us make mistakes. Some of us need help. You could have asked for help, I said quietly. From me, from Mom and Dad. From professionals. Instead, you tried to steal what Grandpa intended us to share and publicly humiliate me in the process. Josh had no response to that. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. I turned to our shocked parents. I'm going to meet with Mark Donovan on Monday to secure the lake house and ensure Josh can't take any further steps to sell it. You're welcome to join us. Without waiting for their response, I walked to the door. Before leaving, I turned back one last time. Grandpa wanted that lake house to bring us together, Josh. Instead, you've driven us further apart than ever. I walked out into the night, leaving behind the beautiful house built on lies and the brother I no longer recognized. The confrontation at Josh's house marked a turning point. What had been a private family matter was now in the open, with witnesses to Josh's deception and my public stand against it. As I drove home for the second time that night, my phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages from family members who had been at the party. Most expressed shock and support, though a few criticized me for making a scene at what should have been a celebration. I ignored them all, needing time to process what had happened and plan my next steps. By the time I reached my apartment, it was past midnight. I was mentally and emotionally exhausted, but sleep seemed impossible with my mind racing. I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat at my kitchen table, spreading out Grandpa's letter and the legal documents I had. Reading through them carefully, I confirmed what Mark had told me. The lake house was indeed left to both Josh and me, with me holding 51% ownership and final decision-making authority as trustee. There were specific stipulations about maintaining the property within the family for at least 10 years after Grandpa's passing, and clear instructions that any decision to sell would require both our consent. Grandpa had thought of everything, it seemed, except the possibility that Josh would try to circumvent his wishes so completely. My phone rang around 1 in the morning. It was Ashley, Josh's girlfriend. "Emily, I'm sorry to call so late," she said, her voice strained. I needed to talk to someone who understands what happened tonight." "It's okay," I assured her. "How are you doing?" "Honestly? Terrible. I had no idea about any of this, Emily. Josh told me his grandfather had left him the lake house because they were so close. He said you were upset about it because you felt entitled to it." She paused. I feel like such a fool. My heart went out to her. Ashley had been dating Josh for almost a year, and though I didn't know her well, she had always seemed genuine and kind during our few interactions. "You're not a fool," I said. "Josh has always been good at presenting the version of reality that benefits him. The gambling is what really blindsided me," she continued. "He swore to me he had stopped. We've been talking about getting engaged, and now I find out our whole relationship has been built on lies." We talked for nearly an hour, Ashley revealing more details about Josh's financial problems than he had admitted at the party. According to her, Josh had borrowed money not just from conventional lenders, but from people who employed more aggressive collection methods. His desperation to sell the lake house suddenly made even more sense. "What are you going to do now?" I asked her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I love him, but I don't know if I can trust him again." "What about you? What will you do about the lake house?" "Protect it," I said without hesitation. "It's what Grandpa wanted." After we hung up, I finally managed to get a few hours of fitful sleep. Sunday morning brought more messages, including one from our parents asking to meet for lunch. I agreed, knowing this conversation couldn't be postponed. We met at a quiet restaurant near their home. They looked tired and drawn, clearly having had as little sleep as I had. "We talked to Josh this morning," Dad began after we ordered. "He admitted everything. The gambling, the debts, the plan to sell the lake house. He also told us he's been staying there weekends, making plans for renovations," Mom added. "He says he's already put money into updating the kitchen." Without consulting me or getting approval from the estate, I pointed out, "Which violates the terms of the will." Dad sighed heavily. "Emily, we know you have legal standing here, but we're talking about your brother. He's in serious trouble." I felt a familiar frustration rising. Even now, they were positioning themselves as Josh's defenders. "I understand he's in trouble," I said carefully, "but that doesn't justify what he did. He lied to everyone, tried to sell property that wasn't solely his, and deliberately set out to humiliate me in the process." "He wasn't thinking clearly," Mom said. "He was desperate." "That's not an excuse," I replied firmly. "And it doesn't change what happens next. I'm meeting with Mark tomorrow to secure the property and ensure Josh can't take any further steps towards selling it." "And then what?" Dad asked. "Your brother owes dangerous people money he doesn't have. What's your plan for that?" I set down my fork, meeting his gaze directly. "That's not my responsibility, Dad. Josh is an adult who made his own choices. I'll protect Grandpa's legacy as he asked me to do, but I won't enable Josh's self-destructive behavior by letting him sell off family property to cover gambling debts." "So you'll just let him face the consequences alone?" Mom asked, her voice rising slightly. "I didn't say that," I replied. "I'm willing to help Josh get professional help for his gambling addiction. I'm willing to work with him on a repayment plan for legitimate debts. What I'm not willing to do is pretend his behavior was acceptable or let him manipulate the situation any further." My parents exchanged looks, clearly not satisfied with my response, but unable to argue with its logic. "We just want peace in the family," Mom said finally. "So do I assured her. But peace built on lies and manipulation isn't really peace. It's just delaying the inevitable confrontation." The rest of lunch passed in uncomfortable small talk. As we were preparing to leave, Dad pulled me aside. "Your grandfather would be proud of you," he said quietly. "He always said you had a backbone of steel under that gentle exterior." The unexpected validation brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that." Don't be too hard on Josh, he added. He's always felt he lived in your shadow with Grandpa. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Even a moment of support had to be tempered with a plea for Josh. Monday morning, I met with Mark Donovan at his office. He had already prepared injunctions to prevent any sale of the lake house and documents formally establishing me as the primary trustee with decision-making authority. What about the renovations Josh has started? I asked. I've contacted the contractors and informed them that any work must be approved by you as trustee, Mark replied. They've agreed to halt work until proper authorization is provided. And Josh's current use of the property? Mark leaned back in his chair. That's a bit trickier. He does have partial ownership, which gives him the right to reasonable use. However, if you feel his use threatens the property value or violates the spirit of your grandfather's wishes, we could seek restrictions. I considered this. For now, let's just secure against sale and unauthorized modifications. I need to think about the longer-term arrangement. As I was leaving Mark's office, my phone rang. It was Josh. We need to talk, he said without preamble. I agree, I replied. Where and when? The lake house. Tomorrow. Just you and me. I hesitated, uncomfortable with the idea of meeting Josh alone in a remote location, given his current state of mind and financial desperation. How about we meet at Grandpa's favorite coffee shop instead? I suggested. The one near his house. Fine, Josh agreed tersely. Noon tomorrow. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop early, choosing a table in the corner where we could talk privately but still be in a public space. Josh arrived 10 minutes late, looking haggard and resentful. I got your lawyer's injunction, he said as he sat down, not bothering with a greeting. Classy move, Emily. What did you expect after what you pulled at your party? I asked. You tried to sell property that wasn't solely yours to sell. Josh ran a hand through his uncombed hair. I was going to tell you after I had a buyer lined up. Make you a fair offer for your share. That's not how this works, Josh. The lake house isn't meant to be sold. Grandpa was explicit about that. Easy for you to say when you don't have people threatening to break your kneecaps, he snapped. I studied my brother's face, seeing past the anger to the fear beneath. How deep are you really in, Josh? He named a figure even larger than what he'd admitted at the party. How did it get so bad? I asked. One bad bet led to another, he said, staring into his untouched coffee. I kept thinking I could win it back, make it right. But it just kept getting worse. And you thought selling the lake house was the only solution? It seemed perfect, he admitted. Quick cash, clean slate. I figured you wouldn't care that much since you have your perfect life already. The comment stung. My perfect life? Josh. I'm still grieving Grandpa. I work 60-hour weeks at a job that's emotionally draining. I live in a one-bedroom apartment because Boston real estate is insane. My perfect life is anything but. Josh looked genuinely surprised. But you always make everything look so easy. Job, finances, relationships with the family. You were always Grandpa's favorite. And you were always Mom and Dad's favorite, I countered. Neither perception is completely accurate, but we've both been living as if they are. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, Josh spoke again. So what happens now? You've blocked the sale. I still owe dangerous people a lot of money. Now we find another solution, I said. One that doesn't involve selling Grandpa's lake house against his explicit wishes. Like what? Josh asked skeptically. Like you getting professional help for your gambling addiction. Like negotiating with your legitimate creditors for extended payment plans. Like possibly selling some of your other assets. I gestured around us. Like selling that $1 million house you just bought that you clearly can't afford. Josh's face hardened. So I lose everything while you keep the lake house? How is that fair? This isn't about fair, Josh. It's about consequences. You made choices that led to this situation. Now you need to make different choices to get out of it. Spoken like someone who's never made a serious mistake, he muttered. I've made plenty of mistakes, I said. But I don't expect other people to sacrifice what's important to them to fix my problems. Josh stood up abruptly. This was a waste of time. You've made up your mind, and as usual, you're right and I'm wrong. Josh, wait, I called as he headed for the door. We need to figure this out together. He paused, turning back with a bitter smile. Together? That's rich. Coming from you. When have we ever done anything together? As he walked out, I realized he had a point. Despite sharing blood and history, Josh and I had spent our lives in separate orbits, rarely finding common ground. If we were going to resolve this situation, that would need to change. But first, I needed to secure the lake house and assess what damage Josh might have already done. The meeting with Josh at the coffee shop marked the beginning of a challenging period. While I had hoped we might find some common ground, it became clear that Josh viewed my actions as a declaration of war rather than an attempt to protect our shared inheritance. 2 days after our meeting, I received an emergency call from Mark Donovan. Emily, despite the injunction, Josh has signed a preliminary agreement with a developer interested in the lake property, he informed me. It's not legally binding without your signature, but it shows his intent to proceed regardless of our legal measures. What do we need to do? I asked, feeling a headache forming behind my eyes. I've prepared an emergency filing for the court, requesting sole temporary control of the property until this matter is resolved. We have a hearing scheduled for next week. Will Josh be there? His attorney has confirmed they will contest the motion. Josh had hired an attorney. This was really happening. A legal battle between siblings over Grandpa's beloved lake house. That weekend, I decided to visit the lake house myself, needing to see firsthand what condition it was in and what changes Josh might have made. I hadn't been there since shortly after Grandpa's funeral, when the grief was still too raw to spend time in a place so strongly associated with him. The 2-hour drive from Boston to Lake Winnipesaukee gave me time to think. I recalled countless summer trips with Grandpa, the fishing lessons at dawn, campfires at dusk, and quiet conversations on the dock under star-filled skies. These memories had sustained me through the difficult months following his death. The thought that Josh was willing to erase all of that history for quick cash filled me with renewed determination to protect what Grandpa had entrusted to us. As I turned onto the familiar gravel road leading to the cabin, I noticed immediate changes. The old wooden sign reading, "Franklin Family Retreat," that Grandpa had carved himself had been replaced with a sleek new one simply stating Lake House. The wildflowers that had always been allowed to grow freely along the driveway had been cut back, replaced with generic landscaping rocks. The cabin itself looked different too. The weathered blue shutters that had given the place its charm had been removed completely. The front porch furniture, Grandpa's old rocking chairs, and the porch swing where I had spent countless hours reading were gone, replaced with modern outdoor furniture that looked like it belonged at a resort rather than a family cabin. I used my key to enter, bracing myself for more changes inside. I wasn't disappointed. The main living area had been partially renovated, with half the original knotty pine walls removed, exposing framing where presumably drywall would be installed. The stone fireplace where we had roasted marshmallows on rainy days remained, but it had been painted a stark white, erasing the natural beauty of the variegated stones Grandpa had collected from the lakeshore. The kitchen renovation was further along, with new stainless steel appliances and granite countertops installed, replacing Grandma's vintage stove and the worn butcher block counters where she had taught me to bake her famous blueberry muffins. The warm, lived-in feel of the space had been replaced with a generic luxury aesthetic that could have been pulled from any high-end real estate listing. I moved through the space like a ghost, cataloging each change with a growing sense of loss. The bedrooms remained largely untouched, though Josh had clearly been using the master bedroom, his clothes strewn across the bed Grandpa had built by hand from local pine. On the dresser sat framed photos I recognized from Grandpa's house, images of him with Josh from various fishing trips and holidays. Notably absent were any photos including me or showing the three of us together, though I knew such pictures existed in abundance. Outside on the dock, I sat in the spot where Grandpa and I had shared so many conversations. The lake was peaceful, early spring bringing a crisp clarity to the air and water. A pair of loons called to each other in the distance, their haunting cries echoing across the water. "What would you want me to do, Grandpa?" I whispered aloud. "How do I honor your wishes without destroying what's left of this family?" As if in answer, my phone rang. It was Marian Collins, the elderly neighbor whose cabin was just down the shore. "Emily? I thought I saw your car drive in," she said when I answered. "Are you at Frank's place?" "Yes, I'm on the dock right now," I replied. "Well, come on over for coffee. I've been hoping to catch you since Frank passed. That brother of yours isn't much for chatting with the neighbors." 20 minutes later, I was seated in Marianne's cozy kitchen, a mug of strong coffee warming my hands. Unlike our cabin, hers remained unchanged from my childhood memories, a comforting constant in a shifting landscape. "Your brother has big plans for Frank's place," Marianne said, setting a plate of cookies between us. "He's been talking about expanding it, adding a boathouse, maybe even subdividing the lot for another structure." "He has no right to make those plans," I said. "Grandpa left the property to both of us, with me as primary trustee." Marianne nodded. "That's what Frank told me. He was concerned about Josh's financial judgment. Said he loved that boy dearly but wouldn't trust him with the checkbook." "Did Grandpa talk to you about his plans for the property?" I asked. "Oh, often. Especially in those last months." She rose and went to a drawer, returning with a small notebook. "He asked me to keep this for a while. Said you might need it someday, but he hoped you wouldn't." The notebook contained Grandpa's thoughts about the lake house, detailed over several years. He wrote about his hopes that it would remain in the family for generations, about specific features that should be preserved for their historical or sentimental value, and about his decision to make me trustee while still including Josh in the ownership. "I know Josh will be hurt by this arrangement," one entry read. "But Emily has always understood what this place means beyond its monetary value. Josh sees a valuable asset. Emily sees our family's heart and history." Tears filled my eyes as I read his words. Even at the end, Grandpa had been thinking about both of us, trying to balance Josh's needs with the preservation of something precious. "He loved you both very much," Marianne said gently. "Different as you are." "Thank you for showing me this," I said, handing the notebook back. "It helps clarify what I need to do." "Keep it," she insisted. "Frank wanted you to have it when the time was right. I think that time is now." Armed with Grandpa's notebook and photos I had taken of the unauthorized renovations, I met with Mark the following day to prepare for our court hearing. He was optimistic about our chances of securing temporary sole control, especially with the evidence that Josh had violated the terms of the will by making substantial changes without consultation. The hearing itself was brief but intense. Josh sat across the courtroom with his attorney, avoiding eye contact with me. When called to testify, he claimed that he had been acting in the property's best interest, increasing its value through necessary modernization. "And were these changes discussed with your sister, the primary trustee?" the judge asked. "I tried to discuss them," Josh claimed. "She was unresponsive." "That's not true, Your Honor," I interjected when it was my turn to speak. "My brother never consulted me about any changes to the property. In fact, he deliberately misled family and friends about the nature of the inheritance." I presented Grandpa's notebook, the photos of the renovations, and Mark provided documentation of Josh's attempts to list the property for sale despite the injunction. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me temporary sole control of the property until a full hearing could be held on the matter. Josh stormed out of the courtroom without speaking to me. That evening, I received a call from our mother. "How could you humiliate your brother in court like that?" she demanded without preamble. "I was protecting Grandpa's wishes and the property he entrusted to us," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "You've always had to one-up Josh," she continued. "Even now, when he's in serious financial trouble." "Mom, Josh created his own problems," I said. "And instead of asking for help or taking responsibility, he tried to sell property that wasn't solely his and lied to everyone about it." "He's your brother," she insisted, as if that excused everything. "Yes, he is. And I'm trying to help him in ways that don't involve enabling his destructive behavior." The conversation ended badly, with Mom suggesting I had never understood family loyalty. Dad didn't call, but sent a text later saying they needed time to process everything. Meanwhile, Josh launched a counteroffensive, telling extended family members that I was blocking him from using property that was rightfully his, that I was being vindictive because I was jealous of his success. Some believed him, creating painful divisions in the family. What surprised me were the people who reached out in support. Cousin Rachel, who had been at Josh's housewarming party, called to say she had always admired my relationship with Grandpa and knew I would honor his wishes. Uncle Peter, Dad's brother, emailed that Grandpa had confided in him about his concerns regarding Josh's financial decisions and his confidence in my judgment. Most unexpected was the call from Ashley, Josh's now ex-girlfriend. She had broken up with him after discovering more lies about his gambling and financial situation. "I wanted you to know that Josh has been telling people you're trying to steal his inheritance," she warned me. "But I've been telling anyone who asks the truth about what happened." Through it all, I found myself developing a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The Emily who had quietly left Josh's party rather than cause a scene was being replaced by someone willing to stand her ground, even when it meant family conflict. I was learning to set boundaries, to trust my own judgment, and to distinguish between helping someone and enabling them. Dr. Winters, my therapist, noted the change during our sessions. "You're advocating for yourself and for your grandfather's wishes," she observed. "That's significant progress from where you were a few months ago." 2 weeks after the initial hearing, Josh's attorney reached out to Mark proposing a settlement. Josh would acknowledge my authority as trustee and withdraw his claims in exchange for financial assistance with his debts. "He's essentially asking you to buy him off," Mark explained. "It's up to you whether that's acceptable." I considered the offer carefully. Part of me wanted to refuse on principle, but another part recognized that finding some resolution would be better for everyone involved. "I won't give him cash that could go straight to gambling," I decided. "But I'm willing to work with reputable debt consolidation services and addiction counselors to help him address the root problems." Josh initially rejected this counteroffer, but as his financial situation grew more desperate and his legal options narrowed, he eventually agreed to my terms. We formalized an arrangement where I would help him negotiate with his legitimate creditors and pay for professional gambling addiction treatment, in exchange for his full cooperation with the terms of Grandpa's will regarding the lake house. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start toward healing the breach between us while still honoring Grandpa's wishes. And along the way, I discovered a resilience in myself that would serve me well in whatever challenges lay ahead. 6 months after the confrontation at Josh's housewarming party, I stood on the dock at the lake house, watching the sunset paint the water with streaks of gold and crimson. The summer season was winding down, but the warmth of the day lingered in the wooden planks beneath my bare feet. Behind me, the cabin had been restored to much of its original character. I had carefully reversed most of Josh's modernization efforts, preserving the features that made the place special while making necessary updates to keep it functional and comfortable. The blue shutters were back, repainted in the exact shade Grandpa had always used. The porch furniture had been replaced with pieces similar to the originals. Inside, the knotty pine walls once again embraced visitors with their warm glow, and the stone fireplace had been carefully restored to its natural state. In one corner of the property, a small memorial garden bloomed with Grandpa's favorite wildflowers. A simple stone bench provided a place for quiet reflection, engraved with one of his favorite sayings: "Time spent by the water is never wasted." The past 6 months had been a journey of healing on multiple fronts. The legal battle with Josh had eventually settled into an uneasy truce. He had agreed to respect my authority as trustee and withdrew his claims on the condition that I help him address his financial and gambling problems. True to my word, I had connected Josh with a reputable debt consolidation service and paid for his treatment program for gambling addiction. He had been attending meetings regularly for 4 months now, and while recovery was a daily struggle, he seemed committed to the process. Our relationship remained complicated. Josh had moved out of his expensive Brookline house, selling it to pay off his most dangerous creditors. He was living in a modest apartment and working with a financial advisor to rebuild his credit and develop healthier money habits. We spoke weekly, usually brief, sometimes tense conversations, but communication nonetheless. Our parents had struggled to adjust to the new reality between their children. For years, they had positioned themselves as Josh's defenders and my critics. With Josh finally facing consequences for his actions and me standing firm in my boundaries, they were forced to recalibrate their understanding of both of us. Your father and I have been doing some soul-searching. Mom had admitted during a difficult but necessary conversation 3 months ago. We may have enabled Josh's behavior over the years by always making excuses for him. And we may have taken your responsibility and capability for granted, Dad added, expecting you to always be the strong one, the one who didn't need support. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start. They were making efforts to treat us more equally, to hold Josh accountable, and to acknowledge my feelings and needs as valid. I had created a family trust for the lake house, with clear guidelines for its use and maintenance. Josh was welcome to use the property for limited periods, with advance notice, as long as he respected the rules we had established together. It wasn't the arrangement Grandpa had originally envisioned, but it honored the spirit of his wishes while acknowledging the reality of our complicated family dynamics. My personal growth had perhaps been the most surprising aspect of this difficult period. The Emily who had quietly left Josh's party rather than cause a scene had been replaced by someone willing to stand her ground, even when it meant conflict. I had learned to set boundaries, to trust my own judgment, and to balance compassion with self-protection. Dr. Winters had helped me recognize that my lifelong pattern of accommodating others at my own expense wasn't actually helping anyone. True generosity comes from strength, not obligation. She had told me, you can only give freely when you know your own worth. I had reconnected with friends from the lake community, people who had known Grandpa and understood what this place meant. We had held a small memorial gathering on what would have been his birthday, sharing stories and laughter around a bonfire on the beach. It had been healing to celebrate his life in a place he loved, surrounded by people who had valued him. The most unexpected development had come just last week, in the form of a letter from Josh. Unlike the manipulative communications of the past, this one felt genuinely reflective. I've been doing a lot of thinking in my recovery program, he wrote. Part of the process is making amends for harm done. I want you to know that I recognize how deeply I betrayed both you and Grandpa with my actions. I was so caught up in my own resentment and financial panic that I convinced myself I was entitled to do whatever was necessary to solve my problems, regardless of who got hurt. He went on to acknowledge specific ways he had manipulated situations and people, including the housewarming party announcement designed to humiliate me and claim sole ownership of the lake house. I can't undo what I did, the letter concluded. But I want you to know that I'm working to become someone who wouldn't make those choices again. Someone Grandpa might actually be proud of. The way he was always proud of you. It wasn't a magical fix for years of complex family dynamics, but it was perhaps the first completely honest communication we had shared in our adult lives. I had responded with a brief note of my own, acknowledging his efforts and expressing hope for his continued recovery. As the sun dipped below the tree line, casting long shadows across the lake, I heard footsteps on the dock behind me. Josh had arrived for his first visit since our agreement had been formalized. We had agreed to spend the weekend at the lake house together, a tentative experiment in rebuilding some kind of relationship. It looks the same, he said, coming to stand beside me. Like Grandpa could walk out the door any minute with his fishing gear. That was the idea, I replied. To preserve what made this place special to him, to us. Josh nodded, gazing out over the water. I didn't understand before what this place really meant. I just saw dollar signs, a solution to my problems. And now? I asked. Now I see what Grandpa was trying to protect. He hesitated. What you were trying to protect? We stood in silence for a few minutes, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't the close sibling relationship Grandpa had hoped for. But it was a beginning, fragile and tentative, like the first green shoots after a forest fire. Grandpa used to say that the lake teaches patience, I said finally. That you can't rush the seasons or force the fish to bite. You just have to show up, day after day, and be present for whatever comes. Sounds like good advice for more than just fishing. Josh replied quietly. I think that was his point. As night settled fully over the lake, we walked back to the cabin together, two people connected by blood and history, by loss and hope, by a shared inheritance that went far beyond property. The true legacy Grandpa had left us wasn't the lake house itself, but the opportunity to find our way back to being family. However long and winding that path might be. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against a family member who is in the wrong? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more about family dynamics, standing your ground, and finding healing after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story today, and remember that sometimes the hardest battles yield the most meaningful victories.